Okay, we are live. Okay, so this is our HOA meeting on a sacred duty. I'm Courtney Cagle.
I'm Lehua Corpaz.
Angel Abbott.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, so the first question was, from what you've read, how has your understanding and perception of the process of international policy and law changed? So for me, I have never really known anything about international law and policy. I've never paid attention to it. I've never really been interested in the United Nations or the conferences that they had. So reading this book really gave me an understanding of how it works and how there are official delegates, but there's also the private sector, and they have their own forum. And after that forum, then they choose who presents to the bigger group of people with the delegates, and from there they create the agenda. So it really, or they do brackets on the agenda. So it really helped me to understand how it works and understand that these declarations can become binding, like he was saying in the book. Like, a lot of people don't realize how important what they're saying really is, but it can become binding, and some people turn it into a domestic law from an international law. And so it's really important. And there were some countries in the book who were saying, oh, well, we don't do that. Like, we just, we agree to it just so that we can leave. But most countries will actually take it and they will form their own laws based on the laws that were created in the UN. And I thought that was super interesting because I never knew that before. What do you guys think about that?
I kind of felt the same way. Like, I just assumed that it wasn't a big deal what they decided or said or whatever. And I guess it was kind of interesting to see how much of Western culture is against a lot of traditional values, I guess. Because it talked a lot about the Western culture as being the opposition. So that was interesting. And I guess I didn't realize how big of a process it was. Like, I guess I just always envisioned a room full of people and that was it for a conference, and not a bunch of little conferences and people smaller groups and stuff going to things like that for international law. So that was interesting. Different than I imagined, I guess.
Same for me. I was really surprised to see how much it was the Western, the Western part of the world that opposed the traditional family. Yeah, that was interesting for me to read in the book. So, and then I agreed with a lot of what both of you said just previously, with it being a big process, and I didn't realize how important it was for how a lot of the laws are created there and then carried to the various countries. And that I did find that interesting too, that people just try and agree to everything so that they can get out and just go. So yeah, it was all new and interesting for me too. Great read.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It was definitely a fun read. When we were going into it, I was like, oh no, this is gonna be a boring book. But I actually really liked it. I was loving reading it just because it was really interesting. And I think it is interesting that, the Western countries like America we're the opposing side. And I think it's because we're more individualistic and we're not, we're going away from what is traditional. And you can see that throughout America with all the laws being passed. And so I think it's kind of sad that we're on that side. But, that's why it's important for people, I forgot his name, people like Richard, that's his name, people like Richard, who go to the UN, who make a difference. He went not even thinking he would make a difference, and he really did end up making a difference. So I thought that was super awesome. Okay, so the next question is, does the UN seem to be individual or family focused? This is a kind of hard question for me because it's kind of like both, but I would say overall, just from reading that book, that it's more focused on the individual, because it is there to govern individuals on an international level. And a lot of what was discussed in that specific agenda affected both families and individuals. But the original agenda, before it was bracketed, was more geared towards individuals and what best suits them rather than the whole family. And so, and I also would say that the UN works to unite nations and it's working to unite families. But from this reading, it seemed like it was more individually focused. What did you guys think?
I actually thought it was more family focused, just from what I got from the reading. I saw such a hunger or such a thirst for what Richard had to say, from how everybody just wanted him, wanted more of his papers, and how, I don't know, I just felt like there was a big hunger and thirst for family, traditional family from the majority of the countries that were in the UN. And once again, to me, it felt like mostly it was us, the American world, and some other, not Britain, I don't know, one other that kind of wanted to go for the same-sex marriage and redefine the traditional family. So I don't know if it said that most of the women, for the women caucuses, were they mostly from the United States or were they from all around the world? Do you guys know? Because I'm not too familiar.
I don't think it actually specified in the book, but I would assume that they were mainly from America or from like the Western countries.
Because they were the most in number there, and they were the largest and the most powerful group that was there. So, and the majority of them, were against the traditional family, or all of them were. But I don't know, just to me, I just felt like there was such a hunger and thirst for the family proclamation. That was my take.
I kind of felt, I leaned toward individual, but I kind of felt it depended on which side you were on. I feel like there was a lot of, the biggest reason I felt like it was individuals because it seemed like there were a lot of different, like, this is a women's group and this is like, like different groups for different types of people. But I think the family side, there was a strong opposition that was for families that was more family based. So I think it kind of depended on the side. That's kind of how I felt. But I don't know.
So yeah, that's great. I agree. That's why I was having such a hard time with it, because I was like, it's individually focused in certain ways, but it's also family focused in other ways. And so I think that is true. Like I think it's kind of like half and half, or maybe like a little more than half is family focused, because that agenda was able to be bracketed to say that, marriage is between a man and a woman. So that just shows that more people were obviously for the traditional family, but because the women carcasses were like in such control because their money and their power, it seemed like they were going to win, but they actually didn't end up winning in the end. So the next question is, based on what you've learned thus far, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law? This is like the same question. It's like almost the same question.
I feel like it's almost the same as the first one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't really know what else to add to that. Do you guys have anything to add to that question?
I guess that it's a bigger deal than it seemed like before, but kind of the same answer as the first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I didn't realize that it really had such a huge influence. Like if you think back to that story I don't remember the lady's name. But the lady who was like in the UN in the beginning, and how she had such a huge influence on everybody's decisions, but she was going off of her own perceptions rather than, going off of something that was research based, or was just like more of a sure thing. She was just going off of her perceptions, and it really had a big influence in the future on lots of different customary laws because of her perception. And I thought that was super interesting, because it's all about influence. It's all about how one person can influence a group of people, and from there how that group of people can influence the next group of people. And so really it's just like about how influential you are. I don't know. I don't know, what do you guys think about what I was saying?
I agree, especially where you said that one person can influence a group of people, and then that person can influence a whole group. I mean, look at Richard. And then like that other lady, I think her name is Myra.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for adding in. Okay, so the next question is, what role did you see the Lord playing in Professor Wilkins' efforts to advocate for the families of the world? What lessons did you learn for your own efforts? So in the beginning, he felt like he should go to the UN conference. And at first he brushed it off, and he was like, no, like, I'm not going to go. But then he decided to go. And, obviously Susan was very influential in that process. But he wasn't feeling confident in himself and his expertise, because he wasn't an expert in the area, but he trusted in the Lord and he trusted in himself. And when he arrived, he was asked to present soon after that. And he ended up presenting in a large room. And, this is all because of the Lord. And he realized that. He realized that because of the Lord, all of this was possible and all of this was happening. Because, obviously the Lord supports the family, and he wants everyone to know that the family is important, and it's the fundamental unit of society. And so the Lord was helping through this process with little things. You could see it throughout the book. And without the Lord, none of it would have been possible. Like him, even down to like his appearance and shortening the name of the school, like that helped him to get the speech, which helped him to get the other speech about the family, which was based on the proclamation. And so it's amazing to see how the Lord influenced him, and how the Lord played a hand in all of this. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I kind of noticed the same things, I guess. And I mean, even just simple things like, they were safe in a place that wasn't super safe. Or just, I don't know, financially, he was able to do the things he needed to do to be able to provide people with copies and stuff. And those are really simple things, and they didn't stand out at first, but like, I don't know, they make a difference. But I think just like if I had been him, I would have been like, what's the point in going? I'm not going to be able to do anything. But it was just made possible, I guess. And like having a wife and family that he's been provided with that can support him and stuff. And it was a good timing with the proclamation having come out and everything. So that was kind of cool. And those are things I noticed.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool about his appearance, how he'd been growing his beard, and how, he said he recognized later when he looked in the mirror and realized he didn't look like the clean cut BYU person. He looked more like an East Coast Harvard guy. And yeah, I thought all of that, everything. And I was so impressed, like you mentioned, Angel, with the with the strength that his wife gave him, and that he drew upon the strength from his wife. And I thought that was a really good lesson in many ways, because it showed us that you know, his life mission for strengthening the family is really important to him because it shows in his own family. And you know, even though they were going to be celebrating an anniversary, a really milestone anniversary, his wife was so great in recognizing that his work was that much greater, you know, than their romance, and that they could celebrate another time. I thought those were, you know, had he had a wife that was more selfish and wanted me time and wanted him home, you know, with her, he might not have been able to become the person and do what he did. And so it just shows how important it is to have the support of a spouse in the Lord's work.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I think her support was amazing through it all, and you could definitely see how the Lord was helping her as well. You know, like when the first time when he called her and he was like, I don't know what to write about, like, you know, like I'm confused and this is super hard and I haven't written anything, you know, and she told him exactly what to do. Like she knew. And that was, I mean, it didn't say specifically, but that was definitely the Lord, you know, intervening, and he helped her to know what she should say and how she should help her husband. And it was just super cool to read about that. And that actually helps us to move into our next question, which is, even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account? Why is it important to recognize this? So, of course, his wife, as we were talking about, and you know, he was able to turn to her whenever he was doubting himself, and whenever he just needed strength, he would just call his wife and he would feel so much better. And you know, he would be ready for whatever would come his way, because his wife was there to support him, and he also knew that the Lord was there to support him, and he could turn to the Lord for comfort and for strength. And I also would say that Susan was a supporting role, that she pushed him into actually going to this conference and to, you know, being brave enough, because she was like, you could do this, you know, I know that you could do this and we need you to go. And so he ended up going, and throughout she was helping him, and she helped him, you know, with the final speech, and you know, she was really helpful throughout the whole process. And I think that she was definitely a big supporting role throughout this whole experience for him. And I think there was just like other little supporting roles, like the support of those who were also fighting for the family, you know, those who were Catholic or Muslim, just like in another religion, who were fighting for the family. And I think because of this, he was able to see how much of an impact he really could make. And, you know, that guy who came up to him and hugged him, and he was like, thank you, like, where have you been? And he just, you know, it was good for him to see that other people agreed with him and other people were in the same place as him, because with the group of the women's caucus, he was like, oh no, like everybody's against me, but it wasn't true. And he could see that through, you know, the support of the people who are also for the family. What do you guys think?
I agree. Like those are the really ones I noticed the most. His wife and Susan and stuff. I think there are a lot of different characters who played a piece like throughout. Those are the two big ones, though. I think there's a lot of different people, like members in his. I'm sure members in his. They don't talk a lot about the family people, but people in that group probably help support and stuff. But they don't talk a lot about them. But I think they probably helped.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said about all those different people. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was how much of a help the family proclamation was to him. And I love how his wife just slipped it into his briefcase and said, here, you know, put this on top. And I love how she reminded him, you know, at the phone call of, do you still have just to have the family proclamation with you, you know, when he was in the room for 4 hours being, oh, how would you even describe that word? Being tormented by the women caucusists who weren't letting him write, focus on writing. And so I thought that was really great how the family proclamation was such a great support to him, and with his wife reminding him about that, how he was able to just go back in and focus just on that and kind of like have blinders over his ears so he couldn't hear the nasty things that the women were saying to oppose him trying to write something productive. And he came out with such a successful speech because he had the Spirit with him. He had the Lord helping him and his wife. And he was living a good life. You know, he was living a righteous life. So he was able to call upon the blessings of heaven when he needed them. And I thought that was really, really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And he was reading his scriptures every night, and he was praying, and you could tell that he was a very religious and strong man through all that he did and through his habits. And so it's just amazing to see like how you do have the Lord's support through everything, you know, especially in something so important like this, you know, in an agenda that's trying to change the definition of the family. Like, the Lord wanted him to do this, you know, the Lord needed him to do this. So the last question is, any other insightful lessons you gained from the book? So there was a lot. There were so many lessons in the book. But one thing that, well, there are a couple of things that stuck out to me, but one was that he talked about how you have to be a source of truth over your own perception. Well, he was talking about himself. He said that he had to be a source of truth over his own perception. And he had to bring truth to light instead of relying on himself. And so for me, that's like, okay, I need to be a source of truth. Like, I can't just, you know, tell people about how I see something or just give my opinions. I have to give truth. You know, I have to have both my opinion, but also truth, also facts, also, you know, scriptures, also doctrine. Like, there needs to be proof, because when I am explaining my views, it's easier for people to believe me if I have truth behind what I'm saying, if there is truth behind what I'm saying. And another thing was that we have the right to choose to make a difference. There was a section where he was talking about how he feels like it's his duty to do things, that he just has to do it. But his wife was like, no, like, you make the choice to do it. You know, it's your choice to fulfill your duty. And that stuck out to me because I was like, oh, I have the right to choose to make a difference. I'm not being forced to make a difference. It's my choice to make a difference. And since many of us lack courage, including myself, it's hard to make decisions that would really benefit others if it's, you know, something that's scary or something that's difficult. But we really need to have faith in ourselves and have faith in the Lord and make those choices that are hard, even if they're out of our comfort zone, because it will really make an impact on the world. You know, just like Richard did. He ended up going to many UN conferences after that one, and, you know, he had to keep pushing and fighting for the family. And Istanbul was not the end. You know, he had to keep going. He had to keep fighting for the family for the rest of his life. And he put that above his life too, you know, like they had to move out of their amazing house because they didn't have the money for it anymore. But he was focused on making a difference, and his wife, you know, knew that that was important. And so they focused more on helping others and making a difference than on themselves, which I think is a really important lesson. Do you guys have any insight?
I actually kind of had a similar one to your first. I was thinking about like the knowing
So all that stuff is
facts and having like learning about things that are important to you, because like if you listen to the Women's Caucus and just, oh, we should get more spots because we're more important. Well, they didn't really back with, like, there's not a lot of evidence, and they don't give a lot of logical reasoning. They just they just talked over and were more pushy. And it's a lot easier to side with someone who has reason behind what they're saying than someone who's just pushy. And so just, I guess, learning about things that are important rather than just having my own opinion. That's kind of what I got from it.
You could do well on this house.
What was I going to say? I forgot. Sorry. Insightful lessons. I thought it was really interesting how he noticed the little things. I don't think he would have gone there on his own, like we talked about. And I think all the little things that added up helped him to help all of us. And I think that that's an important lesson. So if we can all do a little part, then all the little parts will add up to helping somebody do something big, or maybe one of us to do something big. But on his own, I don't think, like, he wouldn't have gone there, and he wouldn't have, made the speech and gotten to the position to make the speech and then been able to write it, but he had all these little tiny bits of wisdom and inspiration and influence, that helped him to do this great thing. Nothing good is easy. I learned that. Fighting for good is hard, but it's worth it. What else? I had another thought, but it's lost. I've lost it from my brain about a lesson that I remember learning. Oh, I remember. I was so surprised to see how much evil there was, which, I shouldn't be surprised, because when something good is about to happen, obviously there's a lot of evil that's going to stop it and thwart it from coming forth, just like we've seen throughout history. So it shouldn't be a surprise for me to see the evil that happened regarding the women's caucuses and the manners that they treated him, and the feeling that he felt, how he felt so much more evil from them. And it was like so much harder than for him, deliberating in front of the Supreme Court like he did. I thought it was also interesting that he lost so much weight, that he hadn't eaten for 3 days, and that the food that was coming out of the vending machine, was soggy and moldy, and yet he still took pieces off of it. I would have been scared too, thinking I would have gotten sick. But he still took like the crust off of it and ate what he could. So that right there was a little lesson to me to, if we need to nourish ourselves even just a little bit, to take what we can. And so he got that nourishment from that crust of the wet, soggy bread that had molded stuff inside of it, and then the nourishment from his wife and from Heavenly Father.
Yeah, those are all great insights. Thank you so much for sharing. So now we will wrap it up. Lahua, I did send a message. I don't know if you got it. Would you mind summarizing just for a couple minutes what we talked about? Is that all right?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I've been typing as we've been speaking. Okay, so to summarize what we spoke about a sacred duty, let's see, we first talked about our understanding and the perception of the process of international policy and laws. We talked about the private sector and delegates and how the agenda works and how the declarations can become binding. We talked about how a lot of people don't realize how important their decisions are at the UN, and most people agree that are there just so they can leave. They try and keep things amicable. And that most laws are created there, then carried to the various countries to follow. We talked that it was a big process at the UN, and that the Western world opposed at the UN seemed to be the biggest opposer for the traditional family. In regards to the UN seeming to be individual or family focused, we talked that they're more individualistic, yet they also do try and protect the families. It kind of felt half and half. We talked about how the book was a great read, and we all enjoyed it because we learned a lot about the process of international policy and law, and our understanding increased as a result of it. We talked how Richard went not realizing that he would make a difference, yet he did make a huge difference. And it was a bigger deal than we had realized from the UN and the differences that one person can make there, and how one person can influence a group of people, and then that then that group can influence a larger group of people. We also went over how the role the Lord played in this by helping Richard by number one, deciding to go, helping him with his speaking, with his appearance that made him look not that he was from BYU, but that he was from Boston, Harvard, East Coast, with how the Lord helped with shortening the name of the school, how the Lord helped by getting him into this to speak and then to do the other speech. We talked about the supporting roles that the different people played. Richard was able to get strength from his wife, who was very supporting. He was also able to get strength from the Lord in guiding him. Susan was also a supporting role in guiding him by saying that he could do this and he needed to make a difference for the sake of the traditional family. He even got support and inspiration from the guy who hugged him at the UN and said, "Where have you been?" He received strength from the family proclamation, which guided his speech and the foundations for the words that he used in changing some of them to address more for the UN. We talked how he was a religious man and a strong man, and it showed through his habits. He was a bishop. He had, we talked about how he realized that he himself had to be a source of truth and light, and how he recognized that we have the right to choose to make a difference. And his wife talked to him about that and how we're not forced to make a decision. It's our choice. He had to keep fighting for the family, and he focused on helping others and making a difference. And we talked about how nothing good is easy. And I think that about summed up. Would you guys like to add anything else?
No, I think that was perfect. Thank you so much for doing that summary. It was a really,
sure.
really great summary.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, of course. All right. So I think that concludes our meeting. I will stop the